What happens when a Hollywood icon known for his charm, discipline, and quiet confidence finally decides he's had enough and chooses live television under blazing studio lights to draw a line no one expected? The room doesn't know it yet, but everything is about to change. Before we dive in, make sure you hit that subscribe button for Stage View, drop a like, and tell us in the comments, whose side are you on when a moment like this explodes into the spotlight? The studio hums with a kind of polished energy that only daytime television can manufacture. The lights are warm, almost too bright, bouncing off polished surfaces and perfectly styled hair. The audience is buzzing, their murmurs blending into a low wave of anticipation. It's just another episode. At least, that's what everyone believes. Backstage, Chris Hemsworth stands near the curtain, rolling his shoulders slightly, grounding himself. He's done hundreds of interviews. Red carpets, press junkets, late-night shows. This is familiar territory. But there's something different in the air today. A tension he can't quite place. Maybe it's the questions he knows are coming. Maybe it's the tone of the conversation surrounding his latest project. Or maybe it's something deeper, something personal. He exhales slowly. 5 seconds, a stagehand whispers. Chris nods, offering a polite smile. The kind of smile that has carried him through years of public scrutiny. But today, behind that smile, there's something else: fatigue. Not physical, emotional. Out on the stage, Sunny Hostin leans slightly forward in her chair, flipping through her notes with precision. Her expression is composed but sharp. She's done her research. She always does. And today, she's ready to ask the questions that others might avoid. The host beside her chuckles lightly at something off camera, trying to keep the atmosphere relaxed. But Sunny doesn't join in. Her focus is locked. The countdown hits 0. Applause erupts as Chris walks out, flashing that familiar grin, waving to the audience. The crowd loves him. You can feel it instantly, the warmth, the admiration. It washes over him like a wave, and for a brief moment, everything feels easy again. He takes his seat. "Chris, welcome," Sunny says, her tone polite, but edged with something firmer underneath. "Thank you, it's great to be here," he replies, relaxed, crossing one leg over the other. The conversation starts smoothly enough. They talk about his new film, the training, the stunts. Chris laughs, shares a story about a mishap on set. The audience laughs with him. It's the version of him everyone expects: easygoing, self-deprecating, likable. But then the shift happens. It's subtle at first. A pause that lingers just a second too long. Sunny glances down at her notes again, then back up, her eyes narrowing ever so slightly. "Chris," she begins, "you've built a career playing strong, heroic characters. Men who are admired, respected, even idolized." Chris nods. "I've been very lucky, yeah. But some critics," she continues, her voice tightening just a fraction, "say that these roles reinforce outdated ideas about masculinity, that they present a kind of unrealistic standard." The audience quiets. It's not uncomfortable yet, but it's no longer light. Chris tilts his head slightly, considering. "I think storytelling reflects a lot of different things," he says carefully. "Sometimes it's about strength, sometimes vulnerability. I don't think it's just one thing." Sunny leans in. "But do you think there's a responsibility there?" she presses. "When millions of young people are watching you, looking up to you, do you think those portrayals can be harmful?" There it is. The first real crack in the surface. Chris's smile fades just slightly. Not gone, but softer, more measured. "I think responsibility is important," he says slowly. "But I also think we have to be careful about oversimplifying things. People connect with stories in different ways." The audience shifts in their seats. Some nod. Others exchange glances. Sunny doesn't let up. "Respectfully," she says, her tone now unmistakably sharper. "That sounds like a way of avoiding the question." A ripple moves through the crowd. Chris blinks. Just once. But it's enough to signal something has changed. "I'm not avoiding anything," he replies, still calm, but firmer now. "I'm saying it's more complex than that." Sunny holds his gaze. "Or maybe," she counters, "it's simpler than you're making it." The air tightens. You can feel it, like the moment before a storm breaks. Chris shifts slightly in his chair, his jaw tightening. He's still composed, still controlled. But the ease is gone. The performance is over. "You know," he says, his voice lower now, more grounded, "I've been doing this for a long time. And I've learned that no matter what you say, someone's going to find a way to twist it into something else." A murmur runs through the audience. Sunny raises an eyebrow. So you're saying criticism isn't valid? She asks. No, Chris says quickly. I'm saying it's easy to sit on the outside and assign intent to something you didn't create. That lands. You can see it in the way Sunny leans back slightly, recalibrating. And yet, she says, you're benefiting from those portrayals. Financially, culturally. So doesn't that come with accountability? Chris exhales a quiet, controlled breath. Of course it does, he says. But accountability doesn't mean accepting every narrative someone else puts on you. The tension is no longer subtle. It's front and center. The other hosts glance at each other, unsure whether to jump in or let it play out. The audience is completely silent now, hanging on every word. Sunny folds her hands. Let me be direct, she says. Do you think the characters you've played contribute to unrealistic expectations of men? Chris pauses. And in that pause, you can feel everything building. The pressure, the scrutiny, the weight of years of being in the spotlight, of answering questions, of staying diplomatic. Something shifts behind his eyes. When he speaks again, it's different. Sharper. More personal. I think, he says slowly, that people are more intelligent than we sometimes give them credit for. Sunny doesn't respond immediately. They can tell the difference between a movie and real life, Chris continues. And I think it's a bit insulting to suggest otherwise. A collective inhale ripples through the room. Sunny's expression tightens. Or maybe, she says, her voice now edged with steel, it's acknowledging that media has influence, whether you intend it or not. Chris leans forward slightly. And maybe, he fires back, the calm now laced with unmistakable intensity. It's about trusting people to think for themselves instead of telling them what they should take away from something. There it is. The moment everything changes. The audience reacts, some clapping, others gasping. It's no longer just an interview. It's a confrontation. Sunny straightens in her chair. So you don't believe there's any negative impact? She presses. Chris shakes his head. I didn't say that, he replies. But I also don't believe in reducing everything to a single narrative just because it fits a headline. The words hang in the air. Heavy. Unfiltered. And for the first time since he walked on stage, Chris Hemsworth isn't the easygoing movie star. He's someone who's done being cornered. Sunny studies him, her expression unreadable. The audience waits. And somewhere in that silence, you can feel it, the realization that this is no longer just a conversation. It's a battle of perspectives. And neither side is backing down. The camera zooms in slightly, capturing every detail. The tension in Chris's jaw, the focus in Sunny's eyes, the stillness of the hosts around them. This isn't over. Not even close. Because what happens next is where things truly ignite. The silence doesn't break all at once. It fractures. A cough from somewhere in the audience. A chair shifting. The faint rustle of someone adjusting their sleeve. Tiny sounds that suddenly feel amplified, like the room itself is trying to decide whether to exhale or hold its breath just a little longer. Chris doesn't lean back. That's the first sign this isn't going to settle. Most guests at this point would retreat, soften their tone, smile it off, redirect the conversation. Years of media training would kick in like muscle memory. But instead, he stays forward, elbows lightly resting on his knees, eyes locked in. Present. Grounded. Unwilling to disengage. Sunny notices it immediately. There's a flicker, quick, almost imperceptible, but it's there. She recognizes the shift. This isn't the version of Chris Hemsworth she expected to spar with. This isn't charm and deflection. This is something else. Something real. One of the co-hosts tries to step in, her voice light, almost too light for the atmosphere. Well, I think what Chris is saying is. But Sunny lifts a hand, not rudely but firmly. Let him answer, she says, without looking away from him. And just like that, the buffer is gone. Chris nods once, acknowledging it, respecting it, but also accepting the unspoken challenge that comes with it. Look, he begins, his tone measured but no longer softened for comfort. I think we're having two different conversations. Sunny tilts her head slightly. Then help me understand yours. He pauses, not because he doesn't have an answer, but because he's choosing how much of it to reveal. You're talking about influence, he says. About responsibility. And I agree, those things matter. But what I'm saying is, you can't strip context out of storytelling and then hold it up as evidence of something larger. A few audience members nod. Others remain still, watching. Sunny leans forward again, mirroring his posture now. But context doesn't erase impact, she replies. And when certain images are repeated over and over again, they shape perception. That's not stripping context. that's recognizing patterns. Chris's jaw tightens just slightly. And who decides what those patterns mean? He asks. Who decides what message people are supposed to take from something? Sunny doesn't hesitate. We all do, she says. Collectively. That's how culture works. There's a murmur of agreement from part of the audience. Chris hears it. Of course he does. And for a split second, something flashes across his face. Not anger exactly, but something close to frustration. Not at the audience. Not even at Sunny. But at the weight of the conversation itself. You say we all do, he replies, his voice steady but carrying more force now. But it often feels like a very small group of voices gets to define that we. And everyone else is expected to just go along with it. That lands harder than anything he's said so far. The room reacts, some shifting uncomfortably, others leaning in, drawn deeper into the tension. Sunny's expression sharpens. So now this is about being silenced? She asks, her tone cutting just enough to provoke. Chris shakes his head immediately. No, it's about being reduced, he says. It's about taking years of work, different roles, different characters, and boiling it down to one interpretation that fits a particular narrative. He gestures lightly with his hand, not aggressively, but with conviction. I've played flawed characters. Vulnerable ones. Broken ones. But somehow, the conversation keeps circling back to this idea that it's all just one thing. Sunny doesn't interrupt this time. She lets him finish. And that, more than anything, changes the rhythm of the moment. Because now he's not just responding. He's speaking. And I think, Chris continues, his voice lowering slightly, drawing the audience in, there's a danger in that. Not just for actors, for anyone. When you start telling people what their work means instead of asking them what they intended, you're not having a conversation anymore. The studio is completely still. Even the cameras seem quieter. Sunny watches him closely, her fingers now interlaced on the table in front of her. And what is your intention? She asks, softer this time, but no less direct. Chris doesn't answer right away. For the first time since this began, he looks away, not to avoid the question, but to think. His gaze drifts briefly toward the audience, then back to Sunny. To tell stories, he says simply. To explore different parts of the human experience. Not to dictate how people should feel or think, but to give them something to engage with. Sunny nods slowly. And if what they take from it is harmful, she presses. There it is again. The core of it. Chris leans back now, finally breaking that forward stance, but not retreating. Just shifting. Rebalancing. Then that's a conversation worth having, he says. But it has to be an honest one. Not one that starts with an accusation and works backward. A ripple moves through the audience. Sunny exhales through her nose, just slightly. It's not visible to everyone, but it's there. And you feel accused? She asks. Chris meets her gaze. I feel like the question was framed that way, he answers. That's the closest he's come to calling it out directly. The temperature in the room rises again. One of the other hosts finally speaks up, her voice more grounded this time. I think what people are trying to understand, she says carefully, is whether you see yourself as part of a larger influence. Not necessarily the cause, but part of it. Chris nods. That's fair, he says. And yes, I am. We all are. Anyone with a platform is. There's a slight easing in the room. A moment where it feels like maybe, just maybe, the tension might soften. But then Sunny asks the question that snaps it right back. So if you acknowledge that, she says, why does it seem so difficult to also acknowledge the potential harm? It's not loud. It's not aggressive. But it's precise. And it hits exactly where it's meant to. Chris's expression changes. Not dramatically. Not explosively. But enough. Enough that you can see something deeper rising to the surface. Because, he says slowly, choosing each word with care, acknowledging potential harm is one thing. Accepting responsibility for something you didn't intend and don't fully agree with is another. The audience reacts immediately, some applause, some audible disagreement. It's no longer unified. It's divided. And that division feeds the moment, gives it energy, makes it bigger than just a conversation between two people. Sunny sits back now, studying him. And that's where we disagree, she says. Chris nods once. I figured. There's a brief pause. Not empty, but loaded. Then Sunny leans forward again, her voice quieter now, but more intense than ever. Do you think, she asks, that your privilege allows you to see this differently? The word hangs in the air like a spark near gasoline. Privilege. The audience reacts instantly, Some gasps, a few claps, a noticeable shift in posture across the room. Chris doesn't respond right away. This time, the pause is longer. He looks at her, really looks at her. Not as an interviewer, not as an opponent, but as someone who just placed something significant on the table. When he finally speaks, his voice is calm. But there's a new edge to it. I think, he says, that word gets used a lot in ways that shut down conversation instead of opening it. Sunny's eyes narrow slightly. Or it opens conversations people are uncomfortable having, she counters. Chris leans forward again. Or it assumes things about people without actually knowing them, he fires back, the intensity unmistakable now. The audience reacts, louder this time. The tension is no longer contained. It's spilling over. Sunny doesn't back down. Then help us understand, she says. What are we assuming about you that's incorrect? Chris exhales, a sharp breath this time. Not losing control, but getting closer to the edge of it. You're assuming, he says, his voice steady but charged, that I haven't thought about these things, that I haven't questioned them, that I'm just playing a part without any awareness of the world around me. His gaze sweeps briefly across the audience, then back to her. That's not fair, he adds. The room is electric now. Every word feels like it matters. Every reaction amplifies the moment. Sunny opens her mouth to respond, but stops, just for a second, because something has shifted again. Not just in Chris. In the entire room. The energy has crossed a line. This isn't just a tough interview anymore. It's personal, and everyone can feel it. The cameras capture every detail. The tightening expressions, the stillness of the hosts, the audience leaning forward as if drawn by gravity itself. And right there on that edge, you know what's coming next won't just escalate the conversation. It's going to change it completely. The air feels heavier now. Not metaphorically, physically. Like the room itself has absorbed every word, every glance, every unspoken thought, and is now holding it all in, pressing down on everyone inside it. Chris doesn't look away. Sunny doesn't either. And for a moment, the rest of the world disappears. The audience, the cameras, the co-hosts. It's just the two of them, locked in a conversation that has gone far beyond what anyone expected when the segment began. A producer's voice crackles faintly in someone's earpiece off camera. Urgent. Controlled panic. They know this has gone off script. But they don't cut. Because they also know this is the moment people will be talking about. Sunny shifts slightly in her chair, but it's not retreat. It's recalibration. Her posture straightens, her tone refocuses. When she speaks again, it's not louder, but it's sharper. More deliberate. No one is saying you haven't thought about these things, she says. But thinking about them and being willing to publicly take responsibility for their impact are two different things. Chris's lips press together for a brief second. There it is again. Responsibility. The word keeps coming back, like a drumbeat beneath the conversation. I have taken responsibility, he replies, his voice calm. But there's strain now threading through it. Just not in the way you're trying to define it. Sunny tilts her head, her gaze unwavering. Then define it, she says. It's not a challenge shouted across the table. It's quieter than that. And somehow that makes it hit harder. The audience leans in. Chris lets out a slow breath, running a hand briefly over the back of his neck, a rare crack in his otherwise controlled demeanor. When he looks back up, there's something different in his expression. Less guarded. More personal. Responsibility, to me, he begins, means being aware of what you're putting into the world. It means listening when people have concerns. It means growing, adapting, learning. He pauses. But it also means being honest about what you believe is true, and not just saying what people want to hear to avoid criticism. A murmur ripples through the audience. Sunny doesn't move. And what you believe is true, she says, is that there's no real harm being done? Chris shakes his head immediately, frustration flickering across his face. That's not what I said, he responds, sharper now. And that's part of the problem. You keep narrowing it down to something simpler than it is. Sunny's expression hardens. Or maybe, she counters, you keep expanding it to avoid accountability. That lands like a crack of thunder. The audience reacts. Audible gasps, a few scattered claps, a low wave of tension that rolls across the room. Chris leans forward again, this time more abruptly. Not aggressive, but no longer restrained by the careful pacing he started with. No, he says, his voice firm, cutting through the noise. What I'm doing is pushing back against the idea that everything has to fit into one specific framework of right and wrong that's decided before the conversation even begins. There's a beat. Then another. Sunny's fingers tap lightly against the table, once, twice, before going still again. And who do you think decides that framework? She asks. Chris doesn't hesitate this time. People with platforms, he says. Media. Commentary. Conversations like this. The words hang in the air. And suddenly, the scope of the conversation widens. It's not just about movies anymore. It's about this very moment. Sunny hears it. Of course she does. Her eyes narrow slightly, but her voice stays measured. So now the media is the problem? She asks. Chris exhales a short, controlled breath. No, he says. But it's part of the ecosystem. And sometimes it leans toward creating narratives instead of exploring them. The audience reacts again, split, louder this time. Some nodding, some shaking their heads. One of the co-hosts shifts uncomfortably, glancing toward the producers. Another forces a small smile that doesn't quite land. Sunny leans forward, her voice lower now, but carrying an intensity that cuts through the room. You're sitting here on this platform, she says, benefiting from that same media, promoting your work, reaching millions of people, and yet you're criticizing the very system that allows you to do that. Chris doesn't flinch. Yes, he says simply. That single word hits harder than a paragraph. Yes. No qualifiers. No softening. Just acceptance. The audience goes still again. You can benefit from something and still question it, he continues. In fact, I think you should. Otherwise, nothing changes. Sunny studies him for a long moment. And what exactly are you trying to change? She asks. Chris's gaze sharpens. The idea, he says slowly, that there's only one acceptable way to interpret something, and that if you don't align with it, you're somehow part of the problem. There's a shift in the room. Not just tension now. Something deeper. Reflection. Discomfort. Recognition. Sunny sits back, crossing one leg over the other, her posture composed, but her eyes never leave his. Or, she says, it's about holding people accountable when they contribute to something harmful, whether they intended to or not. Chris nods once. And I'm saying, he replies, that accountability should involve conversation, not assumption. Sunny leans forward again, faster this time. This is a conversation, she says. Chris meets her immediately. It started as one, he says, but it turned into something else. A ripple moves through the audience, quiet but unmistakable. Sunny's expression tightens. And what did it turn into? She asks. Chris pauses. For just a second. But in that second, you can see it, the internal calculation. The awareness of where this could go. The knowledge that whatever he says next will define the moment. When he speaks, his voice is steady. An attempt to frame me into a position I don't fully agree with, he says. There it is. Direct. Unfiltered. The audience reacts immediately, louder than before. Some clapping, some audibly disagreeing, the division now impossible to ignore. Sunny doesn't raise her voice. But when she speaks, it carries. No one is framing you, she says. We're asking questions. Chris leans in, closer than he is all segment. And I'm answering them, he replies. Just not in the way you want me to. That's the moment. The line that snaps whatever thin thread of neutrality was still holding the conversation together. The audience erupts, applause murmurs, a few gasps. The energy spikes, chaotic, alive. One of the co-hosts finally jumps in, her voice urgent now. Okay, I think we're getting a little heated. But it's too late. The moment has already tipped. Sunny raises a hand slightly, signaling she's still in control. But her eyes stay locked on Chris. This isn't about what I want, she says. It's about what the audience deserves to hear. Chris sits back slowly, but his gaze never breaks. And they are hearing it, he says. All of it. Not just one version. The room feels like it's vibrating. Every word now carries weight beyond the conversation itself. Sunny opens her mouth to respond. But before she can, a voice cuts in from off camera. 30 seconds. It's subtle. Most viewers at home won't catch it. But everyone on that stage does. 30 seconds. The segment is ending. And suddenly, everything becomes urgent. Sunny glances briefly toward the camera, then back at Chris. There's a decision in her eyes now. A final move. If you had to say one thing, she says quickly, to the people who feel negatively impacted by the images you've helped create, what would it be? The question lands like a final strike. Clean. Focused. Impossible to dodge. Chris goes still. Completely still. The audience quiets instantly, as if pulled into the gravity of the moment. 5 seconds. 4. 3. Chris inhales. And when he speaks, his voice is quieter than it's been all segment. But it carries farther than anything he's said before. I'd say, I hear you, he begins. A flicker of surprise crosses Sunny's face. And I respect that perspective, he continues. But I'd also ask you to consider that stories aren't instructions. They're reflections. And sometimes what we see in them says as much about us as it does about the person on screen. Silence. Complete, absolute silence. 2 seconds. 1. The camera light shifts. And just like that, the segment ends. But the moment? It's only just beginning. The applause doesn't come all at once. It starts scattered, uncertain. A few claps from the left side of the audience, hesitant, like people testing whether it's okay to react. Then more join in. Louder. Broader. But it's not unified. Not clean. It's fractured, just like everything that just unfolded. Some people are standing. Others remain seated, arms crossed, expressions tight, still processing what they just witnessed. On stage, the smiles return, but they're different now. Manufactured. Carefully placed back into position like pieces of a set that was almost knocked over. Chris Hemsworth, everyone, one of the co-hosts says, her voice bright, just a touch too bright. Chris stands, nodding politely, offering a brief wave. But the ease that defined his entrance is gone. He shakes hands, exchanges a few quiet words that microphones don't quite catch, and then he turns toward the exit. As he walks off, he doesn't look back. And that, more than anything, lingers. Because everyone felt it. That shift. That moment where something unscripted broke through the surface and refused to be smoothed over. Backstage, the atmosphere is completely different. Producers move quickly, voices low but urgent. A few staff members exchange looks, wide-eyed, half-thrilled, half-anxious. Someone whispers, "Did that just happen?" Another responds, "Oh, it happened." A monitor replays the final seconds of the segment on a loop. Chris's last line echoes faintly in the background. What we see in them says as much about us as it does about the person on screen. A producer exhales slowly. That's going everywhere. And it does. Within minutes, clips begin surfacing online. Short, sharp edits of the most intense exchanges. The moment Sunny says, or maybe you keep expanding it to avoid accountability. Cut. Zoom. Caption. Then Chris's response. What I'm doing is pushing back. Cut. Zoom. Caption. But it's not just the words. It's the pauses, the expressions, the silence between them. That's what people latch onto. In living rooms, offices, phones held inches from faces. Viewers rewind, replay, analyze. Did you see his face when she said that? No, wait. Watch her reaction right here. I think he was holding back at first, but then... And she didn't back down either. The conversation fractures into thousands of smaller conversations, each one carrying its own interpretation. And then the headlines begin. Not hours later. Minutes. Chris Hemsworth clashes on live TV. Explosive exchange leaves audience divided. Did Chris Hemsworth just call out the media on their own platform? Panels form. Commentators lean forward under studio lights of their own, dissecting tone, intent, implication. Was he defensive, or simply standing his ground? Did she push too far, or ask the necessary questions? This is exactly the kind of dialogue we need. No, this is what happens when conversations stop being conversations. Clips loop endlessly behind them, each replay sharpening the moment, making it feel bigger, louder, more definitive than it was in real time. But the truth? It wasn't just loud. It was human. And that's what makes it stick. Later that night, Chris sits in a quiet room, far removed from the lights, the cameras, the energy of the studio. The silence here is real. Not the tense silence of an audience holding its breath, but the kind that settles in your chest. His phone buzzes. Again. And again. Messages. Notifications. Missed calls. He doesn't pick it up right away. Instead, he leans back, staring at nothing for a moment, replaying it. Not the headlines, not the clips, but the actual moment. The way the room felt. The way the words landed. Could he have said it differently? Maybe. Would it have changed anything? He's not sure. Across town, Sunny sits at a desk, a tablet glowing softly in front of her. The same clips play, but from a different perspective. Comments scroll, some praising her for holding the line, others accusing her of pushing too hard. She watches the moment where he leans forward, pauses it, rewinds, plays it again. Her expression doesn't give much away, but her eyes linger, because she knows something too. that this wasn't just another interview. It wasn't just another guest. It was a moment that cut deeper than expected. And moments like that, they don't disappear. They echo. The next day, the audience is bigger. Not just in the studio, but everywhere. People tune in who don't usually watch. Clips rack up millions of views. Debates spill across every corner of the internet. And the question keeps coming back, over and over again. Who was right? But maybe that's the wrong question. Because what really happened on that stage wasn't about winning. It was about collision. Two perspectives. Two definitions of responsibility. Two ways of seeing the same world, meeting in a space where neither could fully give way. And the impact? It lingers. In conversations. In headlines. In the quiet moments where people think back and realize they felt something watching it. Not just entertained. Engaged. Challenged. Maybe even uncomfortable. And that's why it matters. Because the most powerful moments aren't the ones that end cleanly. They're the ones that stay unresolved. The ones that follow you after the screen goes dark. The ones that make you ask questions you didn't expect to be asking. So now we turn it to you. What did you see in that moment? Was it someone refusing to take responsibility? Or someone refusing to be boxed into a narrative they didn't agree with? Was it necessary pressure or unnecessary confrontation? And maybe the bigger question, what do you expect from the people you watch, admire, and listen to? Tell us in the comments, because this conversation doesn't end here. And if you want more moments like this, raw, intense, and impossible to ignore, make sure you subscribe to Stage View, hit that like button, and stay with us for the next story that everyone will be talking about.